Imagine this, a silent visitor speeding through the endless dark between stars, a traveler not born in our solar system. It has no home, no orbit, and no reason to be here. Yet here it is. 3I Atlas, the interstellar object now brushing past Mars, closer than any visitor of its kind in human history. And as it races toward the inner system, something else is happening, something no one expected. NASA's systems are quiet. The world's most advanced space agency momentarily shut down at the exact time humanity needs its eyes on the sky the most. But the universe doesn't wait for bureaucracy. And tonight, we'll uncover what's really unfolding on that distant red planet where cameras have captured something gliding faster than any comet should, leaving behind no tail, but a mystery that's pulling the attention of every scientist, skeptic, and dreamer alive. Before we go deeper, if you love unraveling the strange, the cosmic, and the unexplained, take a second to subscribe, because what's happening out there might just redefine how we see space itself. Now, let's begin. They first noticed 3I Atlas in early 2025, a flicker of movement in deep space observation data from pan-stars. At first, astronomers thought it was another faint comet on a long orbit. But when they plotted its course, it didn't curve like an ordinary object. It was cutting straight through the solar system, slicing the ecliptic plane almost perfectly. This was the third time humanity had ever spotted something like it. The first was Oumuamua, that cigar-shaped enigma that flew past us in 2017. The second was Borisov, a more typical comet that followed later. But this one, 3I Atlas, is different, not only because of its path, but because of what it's doing. From the start, scientists noticed it was strangely bright, much too bright for its size. When they pointed the James Webb Space Telescope toward it, they found something chilling. The light wasn't reflecting like ice, dust, or rock. It shimmered as though metallic, almost engineered. But before NASA could publish the full data set, the United States government entered a shutdown. Funding frozen, updates halted, telescopes, control centers, communication channels, many went dark, and in the silence, the story of 3I Atlas drifted into confusion. Meanwhile, out there, far from Earth, Mars was about to witness something incredible. On the Martian surface, the Perseverance Rover was performing its usual scans when something streaked across its field of view. A white line, fast, sharp, deliberate. The kind of motion that doesn't happen by accident. NASA's image analysts reviewed it quietly before the shutdown began, and their preliminary note leaked online through internal chat logs. Possible object trajectory matches 3I Atlas path. That one line was enough to ignite the internet. And with no official statement to confirm or deny it, speculation took over. Some said it was a trick of the camera. Others said it was the first clear evidence of an interstellar probe approaching Mars. The truth? Hidden somewhere in the hundreds of megabytes of raw rover footage now sitting behind NASA's offline servers. Now imagine the timing. The closest approach of 3I Atlas to Mars happening while the world's most advanced observatories are momentarily blind. Not even Hollywood could have written this setup. But here's the strange part. Independent scientists, using private observatories and ESA satellites, began reporting that the object wasn't behaving like a normal comet. It had no visible tail, despite being close enough to the sun for eyes to vaporize. Instead, it displayed a greenish glow, faint but persistent. This wasn't the kind of light scattering you'd expect from dust. It was ionized carbon dioxide at a level 8 times stronger than water vapor. A chemical signature so bizarre, it forced experts to question whether this object even formed in the same type of star system as ours. If that sounds strange, that's because it is. And it's only the beginning. By late September, the object that astronomers call 3I Atlas had already crossed the orbit of Earth. But unlike other comets, it didn't heat up, didn't shed ice, and didn't leave a visible trail. Instead, it pulsed every few hours. Its brightness spiked precisely, rhythmically, and unnaturally. The pattern repeated like a heartbeat echoing through deep space. Some described it as a rotating signal beacon, but others noticed something far stranger. Each pulse seemed to match a mathematical ratio, the Fibonacci sequence, a number pattern that shows up everywhere in nature and in technology. At first, scientists dismissed the alignment as coincidence, but then came the radar readings showing microbursts of plasma ejecting from its surface at regular intervals. That's not something nature does by accident. So, what is this thing? A rock? A comet? A fragment? Or could it be something entirely different, a relic from a civilization far older than ours? Even the most skeptical voices grew uneasy when a new piece of data leaked from a European Space Agency server. The image, though blurry, revealed a smooth, reflective plane embedded across part of the object, not jagged, not random. It looked like plating, a structure, and that changed everything. The European Space Agency wasn't the only one looking. China's Tianwen, one orbiter, had quietly adjusted its camera orientation just days before NASA's shutdown. On its infrared sensors, 3I Atlas emitted a narrow spike in temperature hot enough to suggest localized heating. But there was no solar flare in the area, no cosmic ray burst. Nothing that could explain why this one patch of the object was suddenly warming and cooling again in a perfectly repeating cycle. That single anomaly started whispers across research networks, because in the language of engineers, repeating thermal signatures mean one thing, a controlled system. Meanwhile, back on Earth, the public was piecing things together in real time. Amateur astronomers using backyard telescopes began catching glimpses of a faint green haze trailing behind the object. It wasn't behaving like dust or gas. It looked alive, shifting in density, forming shapes that seemed to shimmer like magnetic fields. To most, it was beautiful. To scientists, it was impossible. The chemistry didn't add up. When the James Webb data was partially released before the shutdown silenced communication, the numbers revealed something stunning. The comet's coma contained carbon dioxide 8 times stronger than water vapor. Nothing in our solar system produces that ratio naturally. To put it simply, it's like finding a fish that breathes acid instead of air. It doesn't belong here. But that wasn't even the most shocking part. Deep in the raw spectrum analysis, one of the Webb's algorithms flagged a faint but consistent signal. Not radio, not magnetic. something in between a hybrid pulse at frequencies usually reserved for quantum communication experiment. NASA's Deep Space Network team logged it. Then the servers went offline. For days, no new data came out. The shutdown was officially budget-related. Unofficially, no one knew what was going on behind those silent screens in Houston and Pasadena. Then, 2 words appeared on an internal relay forum used by astronomers. Pattern sustain. That was it. No explanation, no follow-up, just those words. Now think about what that might mean. If an interstellar object can emit sustained quantum-level patterns, it's not just moving through space, it's talking through it. And if it's talking, someone, somewhere, might be listening. As 3I Atlas drifted past Mars under the dim light of the Sun, multiple orbiters, including ESA's Mars Express and the Chinese Tianwen-1, continued to record data silently. They all captured the same strange rhythmic signal, and in every dataset, the pattern held steady, almost as if the object were responding. Responding to what? That's what no one can answer yet. The silence that followed the NASA shutdown wasn't just bureaucratic, it felt intentional. Data pipelines went dark. The Mars Relay Network that usually released daily navigation updates went offline for maintenance. And for nearly 48 hours, the world's most powerful telescopes stopped receiving tracking confirmations for 3I Atlas. But science doesn't stop. When official channels close, the unofficial ones open. Independent radio astronomers in Chile and Japan began scanning the coordinates where the object should have been, and that's when things got even weirder. Instead of one clear reflection, they picked up 2 distinct return signals, 2 sources, one slightly behind the other, as if 3I Atlas had somehow split. The implications were staggering. If this was a natural break, it meant the object was fragile, a brittle rock fragmenting under solar stress. But if it wasn't, then it meant something else entirely. Something separating itself deliberately. And just hours later, a cryptic image surfaced online. It came from a European Space Agency engineer who posted it briefly before deleting his account. The image appeared to show a long, cylindrical shadow crossing the Martian terminator line, half in sunlight, half in darkness. The caption beneath read, "Not debris, not reflection." No one knows who posted it first. But by the time the image was archived, it had already been shared across Reddit, X, and encrypted science channels, then swiftly removed. Meanwhile, back on Mars, ESA's Trace Gas Orbiter recorded something baffling. A high-energy plasma burst about 400 kilometers above the surface of Mars appeared in the same direction as the incoming object. This type of pulse usually happens when solar radiation collides with a magnetic field. But Mars doesn't have a global magnetic field. Not anymore. So where did that magnetic disturbance come from? The data suggested that for almost 3 seconds, a localized field appeared near the incoming path of 3I Atlas, almost like it was shielding itself. When this information leaked through internal data mirrors, scientists couldn't agree on what it meant. Some believed the object was generating a magnetic bubble similar to Earth's magnetosphere to deflect solar wind. Others insisted that it was a natural plasma event, rare, yes, but explainable. But if that were true, why did the readings repeat again every 7.2 hours, in perfect sync with the light pulses recorded earlier by Webb? Now the focus shifted from what is it to what is it doing? Because this wasn't random behavior. This was coordination. ESA's data logs showed that each plasma pulse coincided with a measurable change in the object's trajectory, small, subtle course corrections, as if it were adjusting its path. And according to one leaked chart, those adjustments seemed to be guiding it closer to Mars. Was it gravitational capture? Was it steering? No one could say for sure. NASA, officially silent, had still been monitoring through the deep space network even as the shutdown continued. A technical report marked draft later surfaced on a private astronomy forum. In it was one chilling line. Trajectory deviation suggests non-ballistic motion, external influence likely. That's a polite way of saying something's controlling it. And as the object drew closer, Mars began to glow differently. Amateur astronomers noticed a subtle ghostly shimmer across its poles, faint auroras in places where none should exist. These were visible from backyard telescopes, soft veils of green and purple twisting in silence above the red planet's thin sky. But they weren't caused by solar wind because there hadn't been any major flares in days. What was lighting Mars from the inside out? One theory suggests the comet, or whatever it is, might be interacting with Mars's weak magnetic crust, transferring energy through plasma conduction. Another, less comfortable theory one NASA hasn't addressed is that the object is testing the planet's field response. In other words, it's probing Mars. By now, independent researchers and conspiracy theorists were locked in digital war. Some claimed 3I Atlas was just an exotic comet from a carbon-rich star system. Others swore it was an alien probe, echoing the speculations that surrounded Oumuamua years ago. But the data didn't lie. A natural object shouldn't emit structured frequencies, magnetic pulses, or light patterns that repeat with mechanical precision. And yet this one did. Even now, ESA's official stance remains under observation. But behind closed doors, internal briefings suggest something more urgent, something they aren't saying publicly. Because what they're seeing doesn't fit any known model of natural celestial behavior. As the hours turned into days, the silence from NASA began to draw more attention than any official statement ever could. Major science outlets, those that usually publish hourly mission updates, suddenly had nothing new to report. The public feed from the Deep Space Network, which normally tracks spacecraft across the solar system, froze on the same timestamp for 3 days straight. When asked, officials said it was due to governmental data delays. But to those who follow space anomalies closely, this explanation didn't sit right. Because even during past shutdowns, basic telemetry like Mars rover positions always continued. This time, it was as if someone had locked the door and thrown away the key. And just when the silence was starting to fade from public memory, the European Space Agency released a single update, a brief paragraph buried on their website. It read, "Ongoing joint observations of interstellar object 3I Atlas continue in coordination with multiple orbital assets. Data under active analysis. That was it. No images, no press briefing, just confirmation that something was happening, something they weren't ready to talk about. But other agencies weren't as quiet. China's Tianwen-1 orbiter, still circling Mars, detected what they described as a temporary plasma halo event. The event lasted only 4 seconds, but during that time, their instruments picked up a standing wave, a repeating electromagnetic pulse that held a fixed rhythm. Here's the part that made even skeptics uneasy. The frequency matched a known radial pattern from an entirely different era, one that hadn't been heard since 1977, the same pattern detected during the famous wow signal. Could it be coincidence? Maybe. But the numbers were too precise to ignore. The repeating signal carried the exact same modulation ratio, 1.42 GHz, the natural emission frequency of hydrogen, the most abundant element in the universe. It's the frequency that physicists have long believed would be the universal calling card for intelligent communication. And now it was back, echoing from the direction of Mars. Private radio telescopes in Australia soon confirmed similar findings. One observatory in Perth reported a short, repeating burst lasting 1.5 seconds, repeating every 18 minutes. Another in Argentina detected the same thing, but inverted as if it were being reflected off something massive. By this point, scientists weren't the only ones paying attention. Media outlets began speculating about context scenarios, while others dismissed the story entirely as sensationalism. But in quiet corners of the scientific community, something had shifted. The unspoken understanding was that 3I Atlas wasn't behaving like a comet anymore. In one leaked conversation thread, allegedly between researchers at the European Southern Observatory, someone wrote, "If this thing is natural, then nature is far more deliberate than we ever imagined." Around the same time, an encrypted file was posted anonymously to an astronomy forum. It contained what looked like decoded signal data. The file was labeled T9 return. The data inside showed a repeating frequency pattern that, when converted into audio, produced a faint but rhythmic pulse, something that almost sounded like a heartbeat. Engineers from the SETI Institute were quick to debunk it, saying it could easily be interference or data spoofing. But an internal memo leaked later showed that SETI analysts did, in fact, cross-check the waveform and found partial matches with known interstellar signal templates. What unsettled them most wasn't the pattern itself, but the way it reacted to feedback. When they transmitted a neutral hydrogen pulse back into the same frequency, the source appeared to adjust a delay of only a few seconds, but enough to suggest it wasn't random, as if it was listening. By now, the idea of an alien probe was no longer just fringe talk. It had made its way into classified briefings and quiet discussions at universities. Physicists were forced to entertain possibilities they'd once laughed off. Because if 3I Atlas was communicating, even indirectly, then every assumption about interstellar objects would have to be rewritten. But while the world argued about alien signals and plasma waves, something else was happening quietly behind the scenes. Amid the government shutdown, A small team of engineers at NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory in Pasadena was still working unofficially. One of them leaked a note, later verified by multiple journalists. It read simply, "We've re-established tracking. The object isn't on its previous path. It's slowing down." That was the moment everything changed. Because comets don't slow down, not in the vacuum of space. Not unless something or someone is doing it deliberately. When the leak from Jet Propulsion Laboratory reached independent astronomers, confusion turned into quiet panic. According to the internal data, the interstellar object, 3I Atlas, had not just slowed down, it had adjusted its path. A shift of less than 0.02 degrees might not sound like much, but at interplanetary distances, that's colossal. It meant the object was no longer following its projected trajectory past Mars. It was turning ever so slightly toward it. Now, to put that into perspective, every interstellar object we've ever observed from Oumuamua to Borisov behaved like a passive traveler. They enter our solar system, curve around the sun due to gravity, and leave. None of them ever deviated against gravitational expectation. But 3I Atlas was different. In one JPL simulation, the model couldn't replicate its motion using natural forces. The code failed repeatedly. To make the data fit, scientists had to artificially add a force vector as if something was pushing it. But from where? And why now? Right as it reached Mars. That's when someone at NASA made a quiet connection, one that hadn't been discussed publicly. Back in September, just a week before the government shutdown, the Parker Solar Probe recorded a highly unusual coronal mass ejection, a plasma burst from the sun with a peculiar spiral pattern. Normally, solar flares eject in broad waves, unpredictable and chaotic. But this one looked organized. It formed concentric rings like ripples from a stone dropped in water. That same week, 3I Atlas's brightness spiked by almost 30%, not gradually, instantly, almost as if the object was reacting to the flare. This data wasn't theoretical, it was confirmed independently by the European Space Agency's solar orbiter. Every instrument showed the same thing, a pulse from the sun, followed by a pulse from Atlas. Two signals, separated by exactly 43 minutes and 12 seconds. That time difference matched the light travel distance between the sun and the object almost perfectly. Meaning, and this is the part that kept researchers awake for days, Atlas might have responded to the Sunday. Meanwhile, on the Martian surface, Perseverance's cameras caught something no one was expecting. Not a bright streak or a glowing tail, but a sudden flicker on the horizon, like lightning without a storm. It lasted for less than a second, and when engineers reviewed the footage, they found the source direction pointed not above Mars, but behind it, exactly along Atlas's predicted inbound vector. ESA's Mars Express orbiter confirmed an electromagnetic disturbance shortly afterward, a static pulse that temporarily knocked one of its sensors offline. Nothing like that had ever been recorded before. It didn't cause any physical harm to the spacecraft, but the nature of the disruption was impossible. The wavefront wasn't spread randomly. It had structure, a repeating interference pattern, something that looked eerily similar to binary code. Behind closed doors, scientists began debating a terrifying question. Could this be communication or calibration? Because if Atlas was emitting structured electromagnetic pulses, it could mean two things. Either it was trying to send information, or it was adjusting itself to receive something. Then came the most chilling detail of all. When analysts mapped the timing of those pulses, they realized they matched the rotation period of Mars itself, as if the object was synchronizing with the planet's spin. The odds of that happening by chance? Less than 1 in 10 million. That's when the tone of internal reports shifted. This was no longer about a comet's chemistry or velocity. This was now a planetary event. Something intelligent or artificially regulated was happening in Martian space. In public, NASA remained silent, but scientists in Europe began to act. ESA scheduled a high-frequency radio transmission from the Deep Space Network antenna in Cebrero, Spain, targeting the object's last known coordinate. The message wasn't elaborate, just a test signal, a single hydrogen frequency sweep meant to confirm reflectivity. The signal was transmitted at 2:16 UTC. 43 minutes later, precisely the same delay seen in the solar flare event. A faint but unmistakable echo returned. It wasn't just reflection. The frequency had changed, shifted slightly, as if modulated, encoded, altered intentionally. The Cebreros team verified everything. The timing, the wavelength, the delay, all consistent. And then, without warning, the echo stopped. No one dared to speculate publicly, but behind the scenes, one phrase appeared in several leaked memos. If it's repeating, it's responding. For the first time, scientists were confronting an idea that crossed from science into something deeply unsettling. The possibility that an interstellar visitor wasn't just passing through, but checking in. By the morning of October 2nd, the silence from NASA had become deafening. Their social feeds went dark. No press briefings, no status updates. Every telescope that could have been watching 3i Atlas was still pointed toward Mars. But the public data streams were frozen. Meanwhile, over in Europe, something strange was happening with the Mars Express orbiter. Telemetry logs showed slight deviations in its orbit, so small they were almost ignored. But the timing aligned perfectly with the mysterious echo that had been detected hours earlier. The conclusion? Something near Mars had emitted a pulse of gravity, or what the engineers called a localized distortion in the field. That shouldn't be possible. Not from a comet, not from anything short of a planet-sized mass. And yet, every satellite orbiting Mars had logged the same flicker in trajectory. It wasn't strong enough to move Mars itself, but it was enough to announce its presence. Hours later, a single high-resolution image leaked through an internal European Space Agency channel. It was grainy, pixelated by solar interference, but unmistakable. A faint metallic crescent shape peeking through the shadowed coma of Atlas. At first, most thought it was an imaging glitch, an artifact. But then the image was enhanced by a software engineer working off duty in Paris. When the brightness curve was corrected, the crescent resolved into something far too clean to be random dust. Straight edges, symmetry, almost architectural. That's when a new hypothesis began circulating. Atlas wasn't breaking apart. It was opening. The leading interpretation was that the outer shell, the comet's visible crust, might not be a crust at all, but a layered casing, perhaps natural, perhaps not. But one detail stood out to everyone who studied the image. The reflected light wasn't uniform. It shimmered like polished metal. And even more curiously, it reflected sunlight before direct contact, as though surrounded by an invisible electromagnetic sheath. Whatever it wasn't behaving like rock or ice. Then came the strangest moment of all. Around 1720 UTC, the ExoMars Trace Gas Orbiter detected a faint radio emission from the same region. It wasn't random static. It was rhythmic, repeating every 91 seconds, like a heartbeat. When decoded into audio frequencies, the signal had a strange, layered hum, like two tones blending together, but slightly off-tune, creating a natural vibration pattern. And here's the part that shook everyone who heard it. When played through a frequency analyzer, the harmonic resonances matched those of the human voice range. It wasn't words, not in any language we know, but it sounded alive. One engineer described it best. It's like it's trying to talk, but we don't have the right ears. At the same time, down on the Martian surface, Perseverance's sensors started to behave erratically. Its temperature readings fluctuated. Its cameras flickered in and out of calibration, even though no dust storm was present. When the raw image feed was analyzed, a faint bluish hue began appearing at the edges of every frame, the same wavelength as the one recorded from the object's pulse. At first, this was dismissed as interference from solar activity, but solar conditions were completely normal. No flares, no storm, no known cause. The rover's internal clock also showed signs of distortion. Milliseconds began skipping time, literally glitching. And when the footage was stitched together frame by frame, something horrifying appeared in the background sky. A faint circular glow, drifting behind a thin veil of Martian dust. It wasn't bright. It wasn't large, but it pulsed faintly in time with the signal. The rover's microphone captured it too, in a low, rhythmic hum, like a whisper made of electricity. Meanwhile, over at the European Space Operations Center in Darmstadt, a quiet panic began. Multiple systems registered phantom transmissions, messages supposedly from inactive satellites bouncing through the network. One of them displayed a brief, chilling line of text before it vanished completely. Received. Wait. No one could trace where it came from. No one could confirm who sent it. The packet originated from deep space, routed through a defunct relay frequency used decades ago during the Mars Observer mission, a channel that should have been silent for years. But then, all communication stopped. Mars Express, Trace Gas Orbiter, even the Perseverance relay, offline. It lasted for only 6 minutes and 42 seconds, but in that time, the deep space network on Earth went eerily quiet. Every antenna from Madrid to Canberra dropped signals simultaneously. The blackout wasn't total background. Cosmic noise continued, but the Mars channel went flat. And when it came back online, every system clock had shifted ahead by exactly 91 seconds, the same interval as the radio pulse. From that moment forward, the object 3I Atlas changed behavior entirely. Its light curve smoothed out, its erratic motion stabilized, as if it had completed something, an activation or an alignment. The world still doesn't know what exactly happened in that window, but one insider described it as the digital equivalent of something waking up. And from that point on, NASA wasn't just shut down politically. It was cut off. When communications from Mars finally stabilized, it was as if someone had flipped a universal switch. Every signal came back online simultaneously, but there was something different. The telemetry logs showed no missing packets, no corruption, no delay. Yet every timestamp had moved forward by exactly 91 seconds, as though the universe itself had paused and then resumed. At first, scientists dismissed it as a data resync error, but that theory didn't hold for long. Over the next few hours, monitoring stations on Earth began to detect something unprecedented. A repeating mirror signal echoing from within our own magnetosphere. It was faint, buried under normal cosmic background radiation, but when isolated, its frequency pattern matched the one transmitted from Mars. Every 91 seconds, the same pulse, the same rhythmic hum, as if whatever had just awakened near Mars had found a way to reach Earth. The first detection came from the HARP facility in Alaska, followed quickly by independent confirmations from Greenbank Observatory and a private array in Chile. All three recorded the same thing: a repeating, low-frequency pattern with harmonic overtones that shifted depending on the Earth's rotation, almost like it was tracking us. Dr. Callum Moore, a radiophysicist from the European Space Agency, was the first to plot the signal in three-dimensional spectrographic form. And when she did, the data formed an eerie geometric shape, a lattice of interconnected rings, each nested within another, rotating in perfect synchronization with the Earth's magnetic poles. Her conclusion was simple but chilling. It's not just a reflection, it's a handshake. Meanwhile, NASA's Deep Space Network remained partially offline. Some of the older antennas refused to reconnect, while newer ones came back online, broadcasting a strange, synchronized vibration in their hardware. The sound wasn't coming through the signal. It was physical. Metal plates and circuit housings trembling ever so slightly every 91 seconds, as if something invisible was resonating with the machines themselves. Technicians tried to isolate the cause, but the vibration continued even when the systems were powered down. One of them reportedly said, "It's like the metal remembers the signal." That quote never made it to the press, but it circulated quietly among engineers who had seen strange readings before, and they knew this wasn't a simple software glitch. At the same time, civilian ham radio operators began picking up bursts of static, each one followed by a faint pattern that, when slowed down, sounded eerily like whispering. Thousands of enthusiasts across Europe and North America reported the same strange experience, a faint hum, like a chorus of metallic insects, always repeating in 91-second intervals. The community quickly dubbed it the Atlas Pulse. Soon, online forums filled with recordings, and within hours, Spectrogram comparisons revealed something startling. The frequencies were identical, no matter the device or location. It wasn't coming from local interference. It was global. By now, people started asking the one question scientists feared most. Was it reaching out to us? In the background, an anonymous source leaked an internal ESA memo describing something never meant for public eyes. According to the document, the signal pattern from Atlas wasn't random noise, it was mathematically recursive. When processed through a Fourier transform, the waveform produced a near-perfect spiral pattern, a logarithmic curve identical to the golden ratio, the same ratio that appears in DNA, galaxies, and even the shape of hurricanes. It was as though the message was coded in the language of nature itself. The memo also stated that the signal contained phase shifts that aligned perfectly with Earth's Schumann resonance, the planet's natural electromagnetic heartbeat at 7.83 Hz. Meaning, whatever was transmitting from Mars wasn't just broadcasting into space. It was tuning itself to Earth. As if that wasn't enough, the Perseverance Rover captured something extraordinary. In one of its compressed night sky time lapses, a faint object appeared above the Martian horizon, not moving with the stars, not following the path of Atlas, but hovering motionless for over 40 seconds before fading completely. NASA never released the original footage, but a whistleblower inside JPL leaked several frames to an independent astronomy forum. When analyzed, the object appeared to have a faint hexagonal structure glowing in ultraviolet wavelengths not visible to the naked eye. The light wasn't reflected sunlight. It was emission, meaning the object was generating its own energy. When the spectral data was cross-referenced with Mars's atmospheric readings, scientists found localized increases in ionization, as if something had just discharged a massive electrical pulse. And then came the part that no one could explain. Just before the object vanished, Perseverance's onboard clock jumped backward by 2 seconds. Only 2, but that's not supposed to happen. Time on digital systems moves in one direction forward. The system logs described it as a non-sequential timestamp error. But to the engineers who saw it firsthand, it looked like the rover had briefly experienced a temporal echo. Some joked that it was a glitch caused by radiation. Others weren't laughing, because the same kind of error was detected in one of the ESA's orbiters. Just 3 minutes later, 2 independent systems, both near Mars, both glitching in time, and the gap between them, exactly 91 seconds. For the first time, scientists began to consider something outrageous, that the object wasn't just transmitting data or light, it was interacting with time itself. Theories began spreading privately across institutions. Was 3I divided by Atlas some kind of probe manipulating space-time through resonance? Was it scanning our planet? Or was it synchronizing with something buried deep within Earth? No one knew. But one thing was certain. This wasn't just a close pass-by. It was contact in the most subtle and terrifying form imaginable. At first, it was just machines responding to the pulse, metal plates humming, antennas vibrating, clocks shifting in silent defiance of physics. But then, something began happening to people. It started quietly, a few scattered reports online. A technician at the Green Bank Observatory posted that his heart rate monitor had begun spiking every 91 seconds, exactly matching the pulse detected in the signal logs. He thought it was a coincidence until his colleagues started noticing the same thing. Within a week, thousands of posts appeared across social media, people reporting sudden waves of dizziness, déjà vu, or unease that seemed to occur in perfect rhythm with an invisible pattern. No one could see it, but they could feel it. Researchers from the University of Geneva conducted a small-scale study after several volunteers complained of vivid, recurring dreams involving light spirals and distant humming tones. When they monitored participants overnight, the results were shocking. Their brainwave oscillations had synchronized across multiple subjects, all peaking at exactly 91-second intervals. The strange part? The volunteers were in different cities. No external signal should have been able to synchronize human neural activity that precisely. Not through walls, not across miles, not without direct interference. One of the researchers, speaking anonymously, said, "We're not dealing with radiation or sound. We're dealing with something else, something the brain recognizes even when the body doesn't." Then came the children. Parents across multiple countries began noticing their kids drawing the same thing. A spiral made of hexagons, usually surrounded by faint lines, sometimes labeled in shaky handwriting with a single word, Atlas. No one had told them that name. Not on the news. Not on YouTube. Not in school. The drawings appeared everywhere. Classrooms, notebooks, walls, even carved into the sand at playgrounds. Psychologists called it a case of mass suggestion, but there was no explanation for why the drawings share the same geometrical accuracy, down to the number of sides and the spacing between them. It was as if the image had been downloaded into their minds. A blueprint from somewhere else. Meanwhile, the 91-second pulse started appearing in medical sensors, power grids, even weather data. Hospitals reported strange anomalies in cardiac pacemakers. Every patient's device logging identical interference spike. Engineers monitoring electrical substations found voltage fluctuations following the same rhythm. Even satellite telemetry across unrelated systems began reporting synchronized timing errors. At first, these were dismissed as random coincidences, but then came the numbers. The global average atmospheric ionization rate began oscillating on a fixed cycle, not random, not solar, timed. Somewhere, somehow, the signal from Atlas was influencing not just technology, but the environment itself. When NASA systems partially recovered from the government shutdown, they immediately reopened communication channels with the Perseverance Rover. But the new data coming in made even the most rational scientists pause. The rover's onboard radiation sensors detected subtle but consistent oscillations in the Martian surface dust's electric charge, a periodic build-up and release of energy that corresponded exactly with the Earth's Atlas pulse. If that didn't raise alarm bells, what came next did. Inside the data, hidden between telemetry updates, engineers discovered a binary sequence repeating at the exact frequency of the pulse. It wasn't random, it was structured. When decoded, the message translated to a simple string of coordinates, numbers that didn't match any known location on Mars, but pointed to a spot deep beneath the planet's northern pole, a place no rover had ever reached. NASA's public statement called it a data encoding anomaly. But behind closed doors, discussions shifted to something far more serious. If 3 I divided by Atlas was sending messages, then who or what was receiving them? Some theorists suggested the answer might not be on Mars, but here on Earth, because around that same time, satellite magnetometers detected a faint, repeating fluctuation buried within the planet's magnetic field. It wasn't natural, it wasn't solar, and it was growing stronger. When mapped, the pattern formed a perfect interference grid linking 9 points around the globe, each one aligned with ancient megalithic sites like Teotihuacan, Giza, and Machu Picchu. The same geometry, the same timing, and somehow the same pulse. Conspiracy forums exploded. Videos spread like wildfire. Some claimed that Atlas wasn't a comet or probe at all, but a trigger. A mechanism designed to activate something dormant within the Earth itself. Others believe the pulse was a message, a call, or worse, a countdown. They pointed to recurring timestamps in the signal logs, each one decreasing by fractions of a second every 24 hours, as if time itself was being pulled tighter and tighter. When asked about it, one unnamed ESA engineer simply said, "If this is a countdown, it doesn't end at 0, it resets. And every time it resets, it gets louder." And yet, amid all the speculation, some noticed a strange and haunting detail. The pulse, when converted to audio, matched the natural resonance frequency of the human brain's alpha waves, the very rhythm our minds enter during deep relaxation and meditation. That meant, in a way, the signal wasn't attacking us. It was entraining us, gently synchronizing human consciousness with something vast, distant, and ancient. But to what end? No one could say. All we knew was that the line between science and the supernatural was getting harder to see. For weeks, the pulse from 3I Atlas, now simply called the signal, continued to spread across the planet. What started as a rhythm had become something else, something structured. At first, it was only numbers, strings of digits embedded in magnetic field fluctuations and low-frequency radio waves. No one paid much attention to them until a team from MIT's Haystack Observatory noticed a strange pattern. The numbers weren't random. When plotted, they formed a perfect logarithmic spiral, identical to the ones found in galaxies, hurricanes, and even the human ear, the universe's own fingerprint. Dr. Mira Han, a computational physicist, tried converting the data into grayscale pixels, thinking maybe the numbers represented an image. What she found sent shivers down her spine. When visualized, the pattern looked like a fractal map, a repeating lattice of spirals within spirals. And buried at the very center was something unmistakably artificial, a symbol, a simple hexagon, glowing in white. It was subtle, but the implications were enormous. A natural signal doesn't carry geometric precision. Chaos is the rule of the cosmos. But here was order, mathematical order. Within 24 hours, images flooded scientific message boards. Teams from Europe, Japan, and Australia verified the same pattern independently. Even amateur radio astronomers could detect it with home-built antennas. That was when NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory made a quiet, almost reluctant confirmation. Yes, the pattern was real. And yes, it appeared to be modulating in response to solar activity. It was adapting. As more data came in, a second layer of complexity emerged. Every few cycles, the poles would distort slightly. And when scientists isolated the distortion and sped it up 10,000 times, they realized it wasn't noise at all. It was sound, a deep, resonant hum, structured, rhythmic, and eerily melodic. The frequency shifts matched harmonic ratios found in human music, octaves, fifths, minor thirds. It was as if the signal was singing to the universe. At first, researchers thought this was pareidolia, a coincidence of physics. But then, quantum spectrometers at the CERN lab in Geneva detected photon emissions fluctuating in sync with the same rhythm. Light was dancing to the same beat, and somehow, so were people. In multiple labs across the world, EEG readings of sleeping volunteers showed spontaneous alignment to the signal's frequency. Brain waves synchronized, as though the mind itself was tuning to an invisible station. When the volunteers were awakened, they all described the same dream. A sky of swirling light and a voice repeating 3 words, softly, calmly, endlessly. It's almost time. No one could agree on what that meant, but it was enough to make several governments order classified reviews of all radio observatories, restricting data access and shutting down live feeds. That only made the world more curious. Meanwhile, on Mars, the European Space Agency's ExoMars Trace Gas Orbiter recorded something unbelievable. For a few brief moments during Atlas's closest pass, the thin Martian atmosphere emitted an electromagnetic echo, the same frequency as the pulse, but inverted. That meant the planet wasn't just receiving the signal, it was reflecting it, almost like a mirror responding to a flashlight, or a transmitter responding to a receiver. It was as if Mars itself had been waiting for the call. By now, astrophysicists had run out of conventional explanations. Outgassing, plasma reflections, solar interference, none of it made sense. The data wasn't chaotic or random. It was precise, mathematical, intentional. The strange logarithmic spiral embedded in the signal's core now seemed to shift in real time, its geometry rearranging every few days as if drawing something new, a dynamic, living equation written across the void. When researchers overlaid the evolving shapes across a star map, they made a terrifying discovery. Each update corresponded with a celestial coordinate. One by one, the spiral's arms pointed directly toward known planetary systems. Tau Ceti, Kepler 186 farads, TRAPPIST-1. each location connected by invisible lines forming what looked like a network across the galaxy. A message, perhaps, or a map. Dr. Ham presented the findings in a leaked internal presentation later uploaded anonymously. Her voice, soft but trembling, said, "If this is communication, we're not intercepting it. We're part of it. The signal is including us." And she wasn't wrong. Because in the following weeks, a strange correlation appeared between the signal strength and human activity. Every time large-scale power grids shut down, whether due to storms or maintenance, the pulse weakened slightly. Every time thousands of people watched videos or streamed music simultaneously, it grew stronger, as if the object out there, that distant, glowing anomaly near Mars, was feeding on our attention. Somewhere inside the Perseverance Rover's raw data logs, engineers found new evidence that seemed impossible. On one frame, just one, a faint reflection appeared across the sky, stretching in a perfect straight line from horizon to horizon. When they enhanced the image, they realized it wasn't a lens flare or dust. It was a beam, a coherent light line extending directly toward where Atlas had last been tracked. The data suggested that the beam wasn't coming from the object. It was going to it from Mars. But no human system was transmitting. Nothing we know of was capable of sending such a signal. That meant something on Mars had woken up. Governments stayed quiet. But leaked audio from a private ESA briefing captured one voice saying, "If Atlas isn't an object, then what is it? A machine? A relay? A doorway?" The response, almost a whisper, answered, "Maybe it's not coming to us. Maybe it's calling something through us." For weeks, silence. No new data. No new images. Just the endless hum from space. Then, on the night of October 3rd, everything changed. The Perseverance Rover's seismic instruments picked up something deep beneath the Martian surface. A pulse, identical to the 3i Atlas frequency. But this wasn't coming from the sky. It was coming from inside Mars itself. The first vibration lasted only a few seconds. The second one, 15. By the third, the entire crater near Jezero began to shimmer on infrared cameras. Temperatures spiked by almost 20 degrees. Dust floated upward, defying gravity, dancing in mid-air like invisible strings were pulling it. Back on Earth, observatories from Chile to Japan registered a sudden surge of radio energy. A wave of static blanketed every frequency from 2 to 9 gigahertz, the same range used by the Deep Space Network. For 7 minutes, humanity lost contact with every spacecraft in Martian orbit. When the feed returned, the data wasn't the same. Every image transmitted after that contained a single additional frame, too brief for the human eye to notice. When researchers slowed it down, they saw it, a perfect hexagonal symbol, glowing faintly, rotating clockwise. The same hexagon from the original spiral signal, and at its center, a pinpoint of light, pulsing rhythmically, almost like a heartbeat. The world went quiet. Every radio telescope that could still point toward Mars did so. The pulse increased 1 beat per minute, then 2, then 3. Soon, the rhythm matched human heart rates. and then it stabilized. For the first time, the signal synchronized exactly with the planet's magnetic field. No more drift, no more distortion. It was as though Mars and the object were now one single system, connected, resonating, alive. Dr. Han wrote in her final open access note before communications were restricted, "It's not transmitting data anymore. It's broadcasting presence." Meanwhile, on Earth, strange things began happening. Compass needles across multiple continents twitched in unison. Migrating birds changed direction mid-flight. Auroras appeared over the equator, vivid blues and greens spiraling like silent whirlpools in the night. They moved in the same pattern as the Atlas spiral. People began hearing it too, not through radios or speakers, but inside their minds, a soft, deep hum that seemed to vibrate through bone and memory. Hospitals reported hundreds of patients claiming to see patterns when they closed their eyes, geometric shapes of light spinning behind their eyelids. In one viral video from Chile, an entire crowd watching the sky began humming together in perfect synchronization. No one could explain why. No one even remembered starting. Then came the transmission. At 3:17 UTC, the Hubble Space Telescope, still tracking the region behind Mars, captured an impossible image. The spot where 3I Atlas had been empty for days was suddenly glowing, not reflecting sunlight, emitting light. A beam of cold white radiance shot out across space, splitting into multiple branches like cracks of glass, each pointing toward different stars. For 27 seconds, the entire area around Mars glowed like a second Sunday. Then the light collapsed into a single dot and vanished. The object was gone. No debris, no afterglow, no trace. But Mars didn't return to normal. Its magnetic field, usually weak, had intensified 100-fold. Satellites orbiting the planet reported sudden bursts of data packets encoded in quantum noise signatures, signals that no system could decode, but every system could feel. Every time a scientist tried to analyze the data, the pattern changed, almost like it was watching them. Days later, the European Space Agency quietly released one final statement, buried deep within a technical bulletin. Energy emissions from Mars indicate a structured, repeating waveform consistent with non-natural origin. The phenomenon appears stable and self-sustaining. They never use the words artificial or intelligent, but they didn't have to. Everyone already knew something had awakened, something that had waited for millions of years, perhaps longer, for the right alignment, the right signal, the right observer. And when humanity pointed its instruments, when we looked, that was the moment it responded. Dr. Han's final private journal entry, recovered from an encrypted drive months later, read simply, maybe it was never coming from them. Maybe it was coming from us. Every observation, every question, every signal we sent was a mirror. And the universe finally looked back. In the end, NASA never confirmed what truly happened. The official report listed Atlas as lost. object trajectory diverged beyond tracking range. But radio amateurs around the world still occasionally pick up faint echoes, tiny rhythmic pulses that fade and return with clockwork precision. They sound like a heartbeat, and if you amplify the audio, you can almost hear a whisper behind the static. It says, softly, "We are not alone." Then silence. Weeks passed. Mars returned to silence. At least, that's what the official report said. But in the underground forums where radio astronomers, ex-NASA engineers, and data leak enthusiasts gather, the story didn't end. Someone posted a file encrypted, labeled simply Atlas, return, wave. When decoded, the audio wasn't noise. It was structured, a low pulsing rhythm layered with harmonics that shifted every few seconds, almost like it was breathing. At specific timestamps, those frequencies matched the exact resonances of Earth's Schumann frequency, the natural heartbeat of our planet's atmosphere. In other words, the signal had changed its target. Across the world, magnetometers began recording brief, synchronized spikes, each one lasting precisely 3.17 seconds. They appeared in a pattern: North America, then Asia, then Antarctica, and then, for a full minute, everywhere at once. It was as if something invisible had brushed past the Earth softly, like a finger tracing a circle across the planet's magnetic skin. The public never noticed, but those who knew didn't sleep that night. Dr. Han's successor, Dr. Eliza Moreno from the European Space Agency, went public with a cryptic statement during an unscheduled live stream. The data we're seeing suggests something persistent, not mechanical, not biological, but informational. It's as if space itself has started storing data about us. Her stream was cut off mid-sentence. When asked about it later, ESA officials claimed a technical glitch. But deep in the broadcast logs, right before the signal dropped, a strange image flickered across the screen. It wasn't a logo, not a glitch pattern. It was the same rotating hexagon seen in the Mars transmission. And for half a second, it blinked. Once, twice, 3 times. Then nothing. Now, even months later, something continues to echo in the data. Astronomers call it the residual, a faint hum buried in every radio frequency, detectable only when filtered through quantum-level noise reducers. It's not random static, it has rhythm, structure, and intent. The hum mirrors human speech cadence, pauses, emphasis, breathing patterns. When played back through an AI acoustic model, it produces something uncanny. Faint syllables, almost words. No language expert can identify it. But when you slow it down enough, it sounds eerily human. Almost as if we're hearing ourselves, but from somewhere else. One private observatory in Chile captured a visual anomaly too. While calibrating deep sky imaging toward the constellation Lyra, they noticed a point of light moving against the star field, slowly tracing the exact path of 3I Atlas backward. No telescope could identify it. No radar detected it. But when they compared spectral readings, the light carried the same nickel signature from the original object. Whatever Atlas was, it might not have left. It might have multiplied. Now, the scientific world stays silent. But every once in a while, during low-frequency blackouts or global aurora bursts, someone uploads a strange image or clip, a glowing hexagon hovering behind the clouds, a pulsing reflection in telescope glass, a voice on shortwave radio whispering, "The orbit is complete." If you listen closely, especially late at night, when everything else fades, you might hear the faint, rhythmic pulse too. Maybe it's nothing. Maybe it's feedback from solar storms. Or maybe it's the sound of something trying to reconnect, something ancient, something interstellar, something that was never gone, just waiting for us to notice again.